Hi there, Dr. Paul here from drpauldobransky.substack.com, menpsychology.substack.com, and romantopedia.substack.com. I've been asked recently by a reader, Ava, to address a very core topic in any kind of relationship. It could be a friendship, it could be familial, family. Certainly in romantic relationships, there's a huge sticking point between people. It applies to both males and females, and it's the topic of what connection, if any, is there between responsibility and authority. And she asked me to speak on this today. I'm going to do this off the top of my head. I've encountered it so very many times in couples having difficulty and people breaking up, having divorces. Even narcissistic abuse in relationships is a core feature of things gone wrong with the relationship between these two things. But again, they are responsibility and authority. I thought one thing we could do is define them, look up definitions of them to begin with. So let's talk responsibility. The dictionary definition, one of them, is the state or fact of having a duty to deal with something or of having control over someone. For example, a true leader takes responsibility for their team and helps them achieve goals. Responsibility. So you might say it's related to accountability. People like using that word a lot too in relationships. They're very similar things, kind of like two sides of the same coin, really, because someone being accountable means they're blamable for things not going perfectly, and whatever degree things don't go perfectly in their responsibilities, well, they're accountable for that. You might say they're responsible for that. So kind of synonymous. What about authority? I think one of the biggest problems in lasting relationships occurring today, or committed relationships or partnerships or exclusive dating, let's say even, is when there's a complete mismatch between responsibility and authority. Let's define authority from the dictionary definition. Authority is the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce them. An example, he had absolute authority over his subordinates. Well, I don't know about that. Synonyms are jurisdiction, power, command, control, mastery, dominion, sovereignty, influence even. So responsibility has something to do with duties solely assigned a person, and authority has something to do with decision making. Those are directly related. Consider this. Say that somebody's in a relationship and they're given all kinds of tasks and duties all the time, peppered with abuse, narcissistic abuse, and they go about their tasks and they're never going to be perfect at them. It means they're also going to be culpable for them. Oftentimes by a much more narcissistic person who wants to wield all the authority. So one person gets all the authority, another person gets all the responsibility. That's almost like an employer-employee situation or worse, things that have occurred in the past in human history, let's say. Authority and responsibility need to be intimately tied in a one-to-one relationship. What if there were units of them even? If I gave you 100 tasks, 100 units of responsibility, you must have 100 units of authority in order to reasonably accomplish those tasks. Why? Because you'll need to do them in your own style, which is going to be your best likelihood of good completion of them, solving problems. And you need the full decision-making power over them, over the style at which you do them, the pace at which you do them, which you will optimize for yourself because you know yourself so well. And if you're not given authority, full authority to match the level of responsibility, you're very likely to fail at those tasks. Could that perhaps be in part why when there is a split between these two properties of a relationship or a person, one person wielding all the authority, another person wielding all the responsibility, that the person with authority is perhaps never satisfied with the quality of completion of the responsibilities. Now, consider the alternative. Say somebody is just voted into office or given authority, granted authority by someone else. Maybe it's their family, their loved one, their spouse. Maybe it's the community if they're a politician. So they're given all this authority. And what if they then refuse to take any responsibility for accomplishing things, getting things done? How satisfied will the voters be with them? How satisfied will the family members be with them? How satisfied will the spouse be with them? If they refuse responsibility, 100 units of it with 100 units or tasks to match in terms of responsibility. These things always need to be equally matched. And I think one of the things that happens, goes haywire for couples, romantic couples, is when there's a divvying up of shared responsibilities. And one person's tasked one thing, another person's tasked another thing. Maybe the two tasks relate to each other or they're part of an overall plan. And then the correct amount of authority isn't granted by either of them toward each other to adequately complete that task to the best that they can. And even then, no human is perfect. So no task is going to be completed perfectly. There's always going to be at least a little bit of accountability for a little bit of failure on somebody's part. I view your assessment in any kind of relationships you have, whether it's friendship, family, or romantic relationship, for assessing, at least intuiting, the nature of the power balance between authority and responsibility assigned to that authority. And for responsibilities, the amount of authority granted over the responsibility. If it isn't a one-to-one match, or you intuit it isn't a one-to-one match, I view this as one of the strongest indicators of a societal effect that's been going on a number of years that I never really saw before in my practice, which today they call narcissistic abuse. I was trained on just the idea of narcissism in an individual. The scientists Kohut and Kernberg from the 60s and beyond were very involved in delineating what is called self-psychology as an explanation for narcissism in a human individual. But it's taken society these decades to rise to the level where there's so much narcissism in people that it becomes a bit rampant, and it becomes very common for people to be in relationships with narcissism of their own. We all have at least some. It means we have growing to do, but substantially more narcissism in the other person. And what ends up happening is one person is true and authentic and approaching the love relationship to play the game of love, to give love and receive love and expect it to go both ways. But the other person, the more narcissistic person, is playing an entirely different game with different rules and principles. You might call it playing the game of what's in it for me. And they end up using the genuine, authentic person, which some have called the empath, for their own purposes. So the rules are different. You can't win or tie or collaborate or compromise with somebody who's playing an entirely different game than you. You're playing by different rules. What's worse is you think you're both playing the same game, the game of love, and you can't even see that the other person is playing an entirely different game. I view the equal balance of responsibility assigned to the same amount of authority as much as possible. Talk it out if you need to. Really see it. Write it on paper until you can see what kind of balance there is between the two in your relationship. And if it's wildly imbalanced, or if the other person won't even talk about making the playing field more even for everybody, more fair, more balance between authority and responsibility, chances are they're a far more narcissistic person than you, and you don't even know that you're in for a disastrous outcome in the relationship. Whereas somebody who is in it for love the way you are will probably listen to you and be willing to sit down and intuit and figure out and write down how much responsibility is being given to each person. Is it a fair amount? And is there an exactly equal amount of authority granted that person, honored and respected in that person, so that you know they're doing their best to be part of the team in the romantic relationship? Thank you for joining me for this brief talk. This has been Dr. Paul for drpauldobransky.substack.com, menpsychology.substack.com, and romantopedia.substack.com. Thank you.